Most of you know that Catherine and I are married. It's a little bit strange that we're still doing the 2-metre thing, even so. But there we are. It looks better, perhaps, on the screen. But that's not the reason I've asked you to come and answer some questions. You've also been involved in some counselling. I was thinking that this has been a really difficult month probably for all of us, some more than others. And so it'd be good to think about mental health a bit. And I haven't just sort of picked you at random. Tell us a bit about your involvement in counselling.
Yes, just over the last 10 years or so, I've taken a few sort of courses in biblical counselling, and then I've been trying to put that into practice as best I can in my own life, but also trying to help various others in the church family when they're going through difficult patches in their life.
And it's kind of linked with Biblical Counselling UK.
So BC UK, they're a fantastic organisation. They provide all sorts of resources and teaching and support, and just trying to encourage more and more people to be involved in this area of counselling in churches, local churches, so that we can help one another a bit more.
And there's a link to that, I think, on the church website if people wanted to find out more. I was just saying January's been a difficult month, perhaps in different ways for different people. What do you think are some of the main things that we're struggling with at the moment?
I think the first thing is that everybody is just exhausted. I think everybody you speak to, the first thing they'll say is, I'm just shattered. And I think part of that is probably because we're having to constantly reinvent how we do things, how we work, how we study, homeschooling, what a nightmare for so many people, shopping, just seeing people. It's constant change that we're having to adapt to. And that's much more tiring than our normal routines. On top of that, if we're just having trouble sleeping, which I think a lot of people are. So fatigue, I think, is the big thing. Obviously, anxiety, a lot of people very anxious. I think there's always a spectrum of that. But even people who have never struggled with anxiety before, just feeling anxious and worried. Things just don't seem as safe and as under control as they were. And I think the other thing is just generally less resilient. It feels like things get on top of us more easily. We're just a bit quicker to get angry, maybe, a bit quicker to cry. Somebody sent me just a really kind email the other day, and I found myself blubbing. It's just not normal. I think our emotions are just a bit closer to the surface. We're just a bit less fine, And then I think there's this area of stimulation. People either seem to feel that they're overstimulated. They've got kids at home that they're trying to homeschool. They're also trying to work. The house is always full of noise. And they're just craving a bit of peace and quiet. Or there's the complete opposite, and you've got people who are finding the solitude incredibly difficult, just that lack of stimulation. I spoke to someone who said that their skin, they had weird skin crawling sensations just from the lack of touch from another living person. So there's, opposite extremes of that.
It's interesting because some of those things that you're describing, you sort of, when you stop and think about yourself, you might, some of us might think, actually, I'm pretty much okay. But then we realise, listening to what you're saying, maybe I'm a bit more troubled than I've realised. And that's sort of some of the ways that it might come out. Yeah. What are some of the were there other things you wanted to mention about that? Or?
No, not really. I think all of us have just realised that we're created for relationship. And we need other people. And so all of this just feels wrong. Going for a walk but having to stay this far apart, not being able to hug each other, not being able to do church together, it just feels wrong, doesn't it? Yeah.
What are some of the things that we can do just on a practical level to help ourselves and perhaps to help each other as well? Yeah.
I mean, I think from that point of view, don't give up meeting with others, whether that's online, through Zoom or through WhatsApp, or doing this sort of, walking with one friend. I know they're not normal. I know they're not what we want, but they are better than nothing. And I know, often I groan at the thought of yet another Zoom call, but actually, if it's with people, if it's with church family, if it's with people that I love and hold dear, I always feel better afterwards. So don't give up on that. Just simple things, send cards, send flowers, call each other, just send little messages, because it's always worth the effort. And I think it usually encourages you if you've done that as well. And hopefully other people will be doing it to you too. I think just the basics of regular exercise, outside ideally, just keeping ourselves moving, eating healthily. If you are living in chaos, trying to carve out a bit of peace and quiet. I've got one friend who does what she calls a stomp and a pray. So when she's had a really busy day with kids and chaos, once they're in bed, she just goes out, in the dark, safely, hopefully, and just stomps and pray, just to clear her head and get reconnected to God. I think find music that you like, podcasts that you find interesting, just other things to keep you stimulated. I've recommended it to a few people, but Lou Fellingham does a lovely come and sing thing every Wednesday on YouTube, and I think increasing numbers of people have found that really encouraging. So just something to kind of lift you. And I think the last thing that I would say is just to be a scavenger of hope. So everything can feel very down, like everything's bleak and difficult, but just in our shrunken world, just trying to find little things, little glimmers of hope, little things that give us pleasure. I found at work just a little cubby hole. It was a cupboard, but it was a bit of space with a hot coffee, and just thinking, I've got 5 minutes to myself, and just thinking, actually, this is a joy. You know, I think we need to find pleasure in little things, and I think that does help us not feel quite so bleak.
Mm. What would you advise if there are some listening to this who maybe feel that the struggle has just got a bit deeper than that, and it's just a bit out of control, and they're just not sure if they're going to be okay?
I think the first thing I would say is just know, for all of us, but particularly in that situation, you're going to have some days when it's just rubbish. And there's nothing you can do to lift yourself out of it. And people will give you all sorts of hints, you know, drink ginger tea, do whatever, you know, and nothing works. And I think at those times, just pray for the strength just to keep plodding on. Don't beat yourself up if you can't lift yourself out. Remind yourself of the basics. You know, we're not perfect people at all, but we are loved and we are forgiven, and God has promised he's never going to abandon us. Just remind yourselves of those truths. But I think really important, just talk to other people. Ask for help. Even if you're not the sort of person who normally does, find 1 or 2 people that you can be really honest with about how you're doing, and ask them to pray and ask for their support. It can be very difficult. We think other people are too busy with their own stuff and their own struggles. But if everybody's thinking like that, then we're all struggling on our own. we need to be honest with each other and be open with each other and ask for help. But obviously, I would say if you're really struggling, if life is just getting completely on top of you and you're finding it harder and harder to actually function, contact your GP. There's absolutely no shame in that. And it could be that you know, some counselling or some medication could be really helpful. So don't discount that.
Mm-hmm. How does, I mean, it's great to get the medical help, and God has provided that for us. How else can our faith help us? Are there other ways as well?
I think the first thing is this feels like it's going on forever, doesn't it? It feels like we've been it has been a long time. But I was really encouraged when somebody pointed out to me that in the Bible, there were lots of characters who had to wait for massive, massive lengths of time before they could really see what God was up to. Joseph, Isaiah, all his prophecies, he had to wait for a long time before he saw any of that come to pass. So God uses big swathes of time in history. So we have to remember that this is not going to last forever. It will come to an end, and God will redeem it. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing is we're kind of bombarded from all directions with doom and gloom, the news, social media. So it's not really a spiritual thing, but limit that if we're going to be wise, and we know that is overwhelming. Try to cut back on that. But even more important, to let Scripture, let our faith be the lens that we see life through. So remember, all the things that we hear will convince us that we're alone, that life is out of control, and we can start to believe that deep down, and it can have a really bad impact. But if we keep remembering what Scripture says, what God says through his word, that he has promised numerous times never to leave us. He will always be with us. He will always help us and guide us. He is in control. The world isn't spinning out of control. So just to sort of feed ourselves truth to combat those lies, I think is really important. Yeah. I guess some of us are going to find that really hard to keep focused on Scripture. So that would be the other thing I would say. If that is a difficult thing, then try and partner up with somebody. Maybe, agree to go through something together and talk about it and pray about it. Yeah.
Well, you're encouraging us to pray, and so it'd be good to move to prayer now. So thanks very much. I'm going to ask Rob to come and lead us.